My current computer is too slow, and because of that, I'm unable to keep working on my game Thou Wast Thee. So the plan is, make a game in 1 month, sell it on Steam, and use the money I make to buy a new computer. Way back in 2014, I made a game called Project Ariel. It was a 2D platformer shooter where you could levitate guns around and shoot them remotely. It didn't turn out that great since I was a pretty new developer, but I always thought the idea was cool and worth remaking. This time, I'm going to make it a top-down shooter as I feel that would allow funner, more tactical gameplay. So booting up Godot, I made the base top-down shooter mechanics and then made so you can right-click drag on guns to move them around and then shoot them with left mouse button. Then I got started on level design. For environment visual design, I'm going to have 3 layers: walls, floor, and then balcony cutouts where you can see a forest below. I wanted to have interesting geometric shapes for the level, so I used 2D polygons instead of tile maps, and I combined them with a polygon shadow asset I made a few weeks back. Then I experimented with adding different textures to the scene to try and come up with a visual style. I started with realistic textures and then tried making some hand-painted ones. I also made some trees by layering different colored sprites and then offsetting them based on their height and distance to the player to give a nice parallax effect. I wasn't really happy with how everything looked, but I wanted to start working on something else, so I left it for later. This is a rough sketch of the main character's design: a bulletproof vest, quilted leggings loosely inspired by medieval gambeson, and then these are a bunch of guns arrayed like wings because it looks cool. I call this the 100-gun backpack. I figure someone who can telekinetically wield guns would want to have a ton of guns, and I was thinking maybe when you start the game you can only carry 1 gun, but as you go you find parts of the backpack and you gradually increase the number of guns you can carry. I like the idea of getting stronger by increasing the number of guns you have instead of the usual way of increasing how powerful your guns are. I wanted to do rotoscoped animations for the game's characters, so I went on Mixamo and recorded videos of different animations, brought them into Krita, and hand-painted a bunch of animations. One downside of this, though, was that I had to simplify the character's design a bunch to make it quicker to draw, and it still took ages even with that. But once I was finally done with that, I brought everything into the game, set up all the animation logic, and it looked not that great, so it was time to overhaul the visuals. After a fair amount of experimentation, I figured out a good style. For the floors and walls, I set them to be a custom color and then applied a slight amount of the realistic textures to them to make them more interesting looking. I found the details on the player didn't look good at small scale, so I simplified the design and also added shadows. Probably the best change I made was to make the wall shadows have hard edges instead of soft, and to have a drop effect that will shadow the player or guns or any character when they stand next to it. I was pretty satisfied with this look and started adding in details like graphics for the guns and bullets, and then hit effects for sparks and blood. And then it was time for the enemies graphics. I started with something loosely inspired by Russian medieval armor, but ended up simplifying it a bunch to make it easier to animate, and since I already had my animation references together, this time it was just a matter of grinding everything out. And thanks to the simpler design and everything I'd learned from the player animation, it went much quicker this time. And finally, with that done, I could start on the AI of the enemy, so I started with 2 possible start states: idle, where it stands still, and patrol, where it walks back and forth through a set of points. Then I added in an attack and search state, so whenever the enemy sees the player or a levitated gun or hears a gunshot, it switches to the attack state, stands still, and starts shooting at the target, which is either the player or the gun. If it can't see a target, it switches to search state, where it will move to the last known position of a target, and then when it reaches that spot, it does a 360 to scan the surroundings, and then starts moving through a set of manually placed spots to search, doing a 360 scan at each one. If it sees a target, it switches to the attack state, and then just repeat. And of course I added in a death state. So this was a pretty simple final design, but it took me a couple days of experimentation to figure out and put together, and it's resulted in an enemy that's fairly realistic and challenging to fight against. After that, I just added in a bunch of random details like missing graphics, some sound effects, level managers so you can move between levels, and also made so if you drop a gun over a pit it disappears. And then it happened. I started the game, played through a level, and it was fun. It's such a magical feeling when after days of work, you play your game and it's fun, and you know everything was worth it. Also, I'm titling this game Thou Wast Thou since it will be set in the same universe as Thou Wast Thee. I just uploaded a demo to my Patreon. I'm planning to upload a new demo there every day, so if you want to be a playtester and influence how the game is made, it's only $5 a month, and also I don't charge up front, so if you change your mind you can just cancel before the first of the month and you won't be charged. If you do back me, you will get a free copy of the game when it's released. Thanks for watching.